Hey everyone, my name's Dom, welcome back to the channel. I've not done this for a little while, so today it's time to go under the radar to talk about Cold from the North by D.W. Ross. So Cold from the North is a debut fantasy novel from self-published author D.W. Ross. It's book 1 in the Onyxborn Chronicle and it's followed by The Darkest Dusk, and then book 3, The Fury of Fate, is scheduled for a June 2022 release to wrap up the trilogy. In this opening book we focus on two friends, Ogulf and Melkon, who live in the cold north of Broadheim in a village called Keltbran. Keltbran hasn't always been so cold, but at the time of the story they're experiencing kind of an endless winter, so it's a bit like in A Song of Ice and Fire when they're always saying winter is coming. Here in Cold from the North, winter has arrived and it's already been here for several years at this point. A group of the villagers from Keltbran are preparing to make a treacherous journey south over a path through the mountains called the Widow's Trail as they seek to get away from this endless cold and find themselves somewhere a little bit warmer and a little bit more hospitable to live, at least whilst Keltbran is suffering from this long winter. Their plans are interrupted by the sudden appearance of this great force who are invading all of the cities of Broadheim, intent on finding a chosen one who will fulfill a prophecy. So that kind of gives us a bit like a chosen one trope in reverse as one of the inciting incidents of the story. The army has basically swept aside any resistance as it marches city by city through Broadheim, and with this long winter that they're experiencing, communication isn't at its best at the moment, so I guess it's difficult for the people of Broadheim to prepare because they don't get a lot of warning of these impending attacks. Ogulf and Melkon then take on a dangerous quest through another country which is currently being torn apart by a civil war as they seek help to essentially stop this prophecy from being fulfilled. So I think the author does a really good job at setting this really cold scene for the opening portion of the book, the cold north being really clear and well detailed. I did find at the start of the novel there were a few things that kind of stood out as being a little bit odd, but the majority of these were explained with odd little comments here and there, which meant I was essentially able to kind of overlook these under the banner of suspension of disbelief. As the story moves south, things begin to heat up, first of all in regards to the temperature, which for me I did find a little bit odd again because I felt that it warmed up a little bit too much or a little bit too quickly, but that just makes it seem like to me that this cold that they were experiencing, this endless winter, is not natural. There's some kind of magical element to it which is making it kind of permeate the north, and it hasn't got past the mountains, which means that as they cross the Widow's Trail they immediately come out of the influence of this cold and it quite suddenly starts to become warmer for them. The second bit that kind of makes it heat up is with regards to the action, because we move from essentially little skirmishes where we've pretty much just got a single village and then small groups from the village who are out in the wild, and they're having kind of these little skirmishes with the enemy, whereas once we move south and we start to get into the more kind of populated areas, we start to see more full-on city warfare. Whether it was the small skirmishes or the big battles, I did feel that the battle scenes were well written, and as someone who likes battles in my fantasy books, I was able to really appreciate that. The magic as well I thought was generally fine, and I liked that we saw consequences of using the magic, not just in terms of the magic user feeling kind of weary after using magic. You do get that a lot in books as one of the kind of obvious results of magic, that it does wear out the magic user, but here we also saw a different kind of consequence where the magic didn't really come off as expected, or more specifically there were unexpected consequences of the magic, and we have various people then having to deal with those consequences and the effects that they have on their lives going forward. So I did really like that element of it, although I think that it could have been explored maybe a little bit more throughout the book. Also in terms of the magic, I felt that it did lead to a bit of a pause kind of halfway through the book where we got to a point where there was more magic that was being talked about. We had more people who could use magic, and there was almost a bit of a training montage where we learned a bit about the magic, and the magic user was going through some of the early stages of learning how to use it. And I think in terms of the pacing, it came at just the wrong time because the story was progressing quite nicely, and then that kind of put the brakes on it a little bit when I wasn't expecting it. In terms of the story itself, it was definitely in the right place, it definitely fit. It just kind of slowed down the pace that had been building up to that point when it did come along. Similarly to that, I thought it was a little bit strange perhaps how one of the main elements of the story didn't come along until probably about 2/3 of the way through the book, and it was something that I was quite looking forward to, bearing in mind that I'd heard about this in the synopsis on the back of the book. So that was a bit of a shame for me because I knew, seeing how much of the book was left, I knew that we wouldn't have a lot of the book that was actually devoted to that part of the storyline, but I guess this is something that I'll maybe see more of in book 2 and perhaps beyond. Again, I thought this was something that did fit the storyline in terms of where it came up. It wasn't something that we could move further forwards in the book. Things had to happen to lead us up to that point, and I appreciated that because obviously I didn't know how the storyline was going to be, and I thought this was going to be kind of one of the main plot elements, but it was almost a secondary element, something that was more over the course of the series perhaps, rather than necessarily just this opening book in the series. So despite that perhaps being a disappointment for me, the rest of the book leading up to that was still really good. It was still really easy to follow. There was still plenty of little bits of action, and it gave us a good time to find our feet in terms of the world and the story and getting introduced to the characters and finding out kind of the overall what was going on. So it's definitely not something that I would call a criticism. It's just something that came out a little bit different to what I was maybe expecting when I went into the book. So in terms of the characters, I liked Ogulf, I liked Melkan as the two main kind of heroes to the story. As always though, when there's characters that I like, I just find that I want to see more of them and see them do more than we inevitably get, because obviously you've got a more well-rounded story, it's not just focused on two characters. I thought the secondary characters in the story were quite well rounded and worked well for their impact in the story. And then there were some additional characters who were introduced as the story progressed, which I appreciated. And it's something that I find any good opening to a series needs to have, because you won't generally have just one batch of characters who see you through an entire series. So this was good. It gave me some additional elements once I'd found my feet with our main characters. It was good to see these characters being introduced and developed, and I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing more of them and their story in book 2 and potentially book 3 as well. So overall, I really enjoyed Cold from the North. I thought it was a novel with a good storyline, and it was nicely paced despite having those kind of couple of little sections in the middle that slowed us down a little bit as I was just really finding my stride in the story. I will say that I found the writing to be a little bit rough around the edges, just in some places, and you do kind of expect that, I find, with a debut novel, but I would definitely say that the storyline and the characters and the setting more than made up for that throughout the course of the novel. So overall, that led me to give a rating of 4 out of 5 stars for Cold from the North. I really enjoyed it, definitely recommend picking it up, and I will be looking forward to The Darkest Dusk Book 2 in the Onyxborn Chronicles either next month or in April. So in terms of my weighted ratings then, that enjoyment that I had, the overall feeling that I got from this book, led me to giving this 17 out of 20 for the enjoyment, because I did really have a good time reading it, and I'm looking forward to continuing my journey through this series. The world building, I gave the same score, 17 out of 20, because I really appreciated the level of detail and the way that you could really kind of feel the cold, especially in the opening portion of the book. It was really well done for me. The other elements, the magic and the kind of the wider world and the scope of it, a bit of the history and the lore, I really appreciated. And again, as with any other good opening book to a series, I'm looking at that developing in the next book and the third book when I get to them as well. The characters I gave 16 out of 20. As I said, I really enjoyed the two main characters that we had and the additional characters who were introduced towards the latter part of the book. Again, with it being the first book in a series, I'm looking forward to more development of these characters, and I feel like the kind of key cast can be expanded upon in book 2 of the series. Some of the minor characters, despite being good characters in their own right, we didn't really see a vast amount of them. So outside of Ogulf and Melkan, there wasn't really that much of an amount to look at least in the opening sort of 50%, 60% of the novel. So some definite improvement there, but there's some really good groundwork that's been set for the characters. The plot I also gave 16 out of 20 because I enjoyed the overall storyline. It was maybe a little bit basic in parts, and there were some bits which kind of happened a little bit too quick. They were maybe a little bit too convenient, but that didn't spoil my enjoyment of the overall book, however. In terms of writing style, I did say that there were some parts of the book that I felt were a bit rougher around the edges than others, so I've given this 6 out of 10. It's one of those areas that I feel there'll be a definite improvement in the second book, because you could already see an improvement as this book was moving along, so it's not really something that I'm worried about for the series as a whole. In terms of the pacing, I gave 4 out of 5 because it was overall a really nicely paced novel. It was just that one little bit, maybe two little bits in the kind of the mid portion of the book that I felt slowed it down a little bit. It was good to have that variety. You can't move forward at a really high pace throughout the entire book, but I thought that the overall pacing of the book was really nicely managed. And then for the discretionary score, I've given 3 out of 5 because it's a really nice cover that we've got here, and underneath the dust jacket there's a really nice naked hardback as well with that beautiful golden X on the boards of the book itself, so that's really nice. We've got a really nice map in here as well, and overall the physical quality of the book itself was absolutely gorgeous, so it's one that I really love having on my bookshelf. So overall, if you add that all together, Cold from the North scores 79%, which is a really respectable score, especially for an opening book in the series. And I say this a lot actually, but there's some really good company that it finds itself in at equal 28th in my Hall of Fame. So that was Cold from the North by D.W. Ross, another triumphant stop on my journey of exploration through self-published fantasy that I've had in this last couple of years. I'm really pleased to see that that is continuing into 2022 with some fantastic titles. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read this or if you're looking to read it. What did you think of it? What are your expectations? Whilst you're down there, don't forget to check out all of my social media links and support the channel links in the description box below the video. Do the usual liking and subscribing stuff for this video, and then I'll see you hopefully in the next one. Until then, of course, take care of yourselves, read some good books. Bye for now.